I was browsing the vintage metagame when I noticed Hogaak won a recent vintage challenge by a fellow streamer on Twitch. Looking at this list, it's heavily focused on Bazaar of Baghdad, a land that allows you to draw 2 and discard 3. While at a first glance it seems terrible, it is amazing when paired with Vengevine, Hollow One, and other value discards, and can lead to some very broken turns. Before I play with the deck, I asked for some tips from Namersquats on a call. Namersquats, big fan of your Twitch livestream, thank you so much for coming on. I just need some top tips to play Hogaak in Vintage.
Alright, so my first tip is that Bazaar is the best card in the deck, it's the engine, so you want to be looking to keep hands with Bazaar. However, there are strong 6 and 5s where you can keep with cards such as Mox, Deathray, and if you pair them with Wasteland, those are all great starts.
Okay, well what about then discarding?
So with discarding, cards might not always be obvious. You obviously want to pitch your Root Walrus, but sometimes you want to save them for future turns where you can bring back Vengevines with them. And as well, you want to keep green cards in case of Force of Vigor.
Is there anything else that you think I need to know?
Alright, so the deck isn't that easy, but one last advice I could give is to be aware of sideboard cards to play against. Cards like Leyline, Surgical, and Tabernacle are all cards you should keep in mind of.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the call, and let's see how I do.
Good luck.
To start the first round, we have to mulligan to 5, and we managed to find a Bazaar, as well as a Hollow One and a Root Wallet to discard. We bottomed 2 lands, as don't forget we have to discard 3 cards, and it's most likely going to be the Root Wallet and the 2 lands. However, this is Vintage, they start with a Gitaxian Probe, see that I don't have Force of Will, and cast a Minximbu. Now it's not the end of the world, as every Vintage deck has the Nut Draw, and this is turn 1. I played out the game, but after they got a 7/7 Hamster and a Renin 6, I decided to scoop it up after a whiffed Bazaar. Going into boarding, I feel like they're going to be leaning on things like Tabernacle and Surgical Extraction over Leyline of the Void, as well as their control deck, so they will only be playing on-color Moxes, so I added the Oofs, the Pyroblast, and got rid of the Force of Vigors. In game 2, we mulliganed to 6, bottomed the uncastable Collector Oof, and because we're on the play, I wanted to play around Wasteland by leading with Stitcher Supplier. You could have Bazaar'd, got rid of the Bloodghast, brought that back next turn, but we milled a Bloodghast with the Supplier. We ship back the turn, they lead with Tropical Island, they have Black Lotus again. To our luck, they have no premiums to cast on their turn, but after we use our Bazaar, they have an Ancestral Recall. I did some graveyard math, and if we discard the lands and Root Walla, we have exactly enough cards in the yard to delve out our Hogaak, so we don't want to discard the Bloodghast because then you would have to exile it with Delve. We put the Hogaak onto the stack, they have the Force of Will, so we have to pass back the turn. They instantly start off their turn with a Wasteland on our Bazaar, but we have backup for next turn. A card that I haven't seen before in Vintage is Fury, but they wipe my whole board. I think they should have definitely left the Stitcher Supplier on the table, because it milled me for 3, hitting some nice value cards. They play a Deathrite Shaman and pass back the turn. I play my land drop, get back the Bloodghast, activate Bazaar, we find a Deathrite Shaman. This will let me play the Shaman, cast the Hogaak, and trigger the Vengevine in the graveyard because we cast the Shaman and the Hogaak bashing in for 4. There's not much that a non-plow deck can do against me. They used a Renin 6 plus Strip Mine, but it didn't do much. They found a Tabernacle, but because we could pay for the Hogaak, they die. Because we saw a Tabernacle, I decided to take out a Collector Oof and add in a Boseiju for extra land destruction. And going into game 3, we have to mulligan our opening 7, mulligan the unplayable 6, but we find a Bazaar in our 5. I bottom both the lands, and the opponent takes the play. They just Misty Rainforest go, and we draw a Wasteland. Now I tanked for a long time if I should play the Bazaar or should just Wasteland go, and I decided to go for the Bazaar because we have 3 cards in our hand that we don't mind discarding. Now, as we haven't cast a spell yet this game, and we found a Once Upon a Time, what we can do is discard both Vengevines and the Root Walla, and then Once Upon a Time in response to the Root Walla trigger, as up to this point we still haven't cast a spell. If we can find a Hollow One, we almost instantly win the game. We don't find a Hollow One, and I decide to go with Bloodghast over Stitcher Supplier, which I think might be a mistake because we should be thinking about them having Wasteland. We put our Root Wallet into play, and they have it. This game turns into one of those funny games where it's Vintage but everyone does nothing. I keep Wastelanding the opponent because I'm scared of them having an expensive card like Minsk and Boo because they weren't doing anything with their mana. I also want to point out, as I'm inexperienced with the deck, I believe there could have been points where I could fetch Dryad Arbor to delve out the Hogaak. I make another play that I disagree with. As we top deck Root Walla, I decide to Wasteland their Strip Mine, allowing us to fetch in response to them strip mining us back, letting me cast the Root Walla and delving out the Hogaak, triggering the Vengevine. But this doesn't really play around Tabernacle, so it's potentially a very risky play. But then again, they can strip mine my Wasteland on the end step if I don't use it, so maybe it's a fine play. Let me know in the comment section down below. The opponent scoops at the match and we move on to the next one. For some reason, Magic Online paired me against not only the same deck, but the same person 2 rounds in a row. In the second round, I sadly lost a close game 3, and in the third round, I won another close game 3 against the same list. Going into the fourth round, we win the die roll, so we're on the play, and we have a Bazaar in our opening 7, snap keep, and let's get a turn 1 hollow 1. Our opponent has the Force of Will, they play a basic island, and a Hedron Crab. Not really knowing what they're on, we top deck a Vengevine, so I activate Bazaar again. As I was being tunnel visioned, I accidentally discarded the wrong things and left Vengevine in my hand. We play our land for turn, get our Bloodghast back, fetch a land, cast our Deathrite Shaman, and we delve out our Hogaak, in which they have another Force of Will. This is fine though, as we can recast the Hogaak from our graveyard. Now I'm confused even more when my opponent plays Field of Ruin and mills me with Hedron Crab. So I'm playing against Vintage Mill, and I'm playing a graveyard deck. I think we can see where this game is going. Going into boarding, Force of Vigor seems quite weak. I bring in the Boseiju for the Field of Ruin, Collector Roof just as a body, and Pyroblast to counter all their blue spells, which is basically their whole deck. Being on the draw, we need a turn 1 Bazaar, so I mulligan down to 5 and we find a double Bazaar hand with multiple Root Wallers and a hollow one. I bottom the 2 uncastable spells and they start the game with the Leyline. Long story short, this hollow one and these 2 Root Wallers win the game because they cast no spells. Nice Leyline. Going into the final round, we're on the play, and yet again we have to mulligan to 5 to find a Bazaar, but you should know by now mulling to 5 means nothing with this deck. What's sweet is we find a Vengevine, so we can discard the 2 Bloodghast and the Vengevine, cast the Mox Emerald. If it resolves, we can cast the Deathrite Shaman and the Hollow One to trigger the Vengevine, and it works. The opponent follows up with a Dreadhorde Arcanist and ships it back. We top deck a nice Strip Mine so we can take them off white mana specifically for Swords to Plowshares and bash in. The opponent has a Scalding Tarn, fetches a white source, plows our Hollow One, then goes to combat attacks, and then plows the Vengevine. We Bazaar in the end step because we want to mill value cards in the graveyard, and we draw a Blazing Root Walla, so let's put that into play and bash. The opponent clearly can't do anything about it, and we go into boarding. I decide not to make any changes to the deck, and we ship it back. Now I make an interesting keep here in game 2. I know that we don't have any black mana, but we have a Once Upon a Time, so what we can do is use that to either find black mana or a Bazaar. We also have Wasteland and Strip Mine, which seems pretty decent against their deck. We're also on the draw, meaning that we have an extra draw step with this hand. They Mishra's Bauble our face, cast a Preordain, and cast 3 0-mana spells. They draw a card on our upkeep, we top deck a Citrus Supplier, and we whiff on the Once Upon a Time. I end up taking the Blazing Root Walla because it's a castable, but also something I didn't notice is if you take the Hollow One, you can cycle it for 2 mana. However, since they had 5 mana last turn and they cast nothing, I decided to just Strip Mine them because maybe they have to sacrifice the Black Lotus if they need blue mana. They draw from Bauble, miss their land, we find a Bayou, so let's get this Stitcher Supplier on the table. It resolves, we mill a Vengevine, ship it back, and they have a prismatic ending. Honestly, I was thinking that I was in a really good position here because 1 Tormod's Crypt doesn't seem that good, especially with my hand. They draw with Bauble, we find a Mox, and we're actually rewarded for taking Root Walla earlier because now we can cast the Root Walla first, then the Stitcher Supplier, that triggers the Vengevine so they have to sacrifice the Tormod's Crypt, and then we mill 3 with the Supplier. They do sack the Tormod's Crypt, and we mill 3. What I found really funny in this vintage league is that all of my opponents mulligan to Graveyard Hate and then have nothing else to do. We top deck a Force of Vigor, so I play the Mox, play the Bloodghast, attack in for 3 by pumping the Root Walla, but I make a huge mistake and don't play the Strip Mine. I was thinking about what if I top deck a Bazaar, I need an extra card to discard, but what I didn't realize is that I can use the Force of Vigor to insanely mana screw them if they do fetch a land. Not only did they fetch a land, they fetched an Ancestral Recall, so I decided to Force of Vigor the 2 mana sources on their upkeep so that if they draw 3 cards, hopefully they don't have mana to do anything with the cards. I did play this league at midnight last night, so I don't think I played perfectly, but overall I had a ton of fun with this deck. We did end up 4-1, so I know all of you gambling degens want to see me open the chest, so as always please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and check this video out because YouTube thinks you'll like it.